a handful of years ago, I was converting my VHS tapes to DVD or digital or something like that. And so I was watching this old stuff of me. I'm like 16 years old, 17 years old. And I was a lunatic, man. Like, I went out there with so much energy.
Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life is wrestling.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with Cody Diener. I am Cody Diener, and I am a professional wrestler. I'm a professional wrestling producer with TNA Wrestling. I'm a professional speaker traveling all across North America, going into schools and youth groups and businesses, sharing my story and the life lessons I've learned along the way. I am also a father to 4 wonderful children and a husband to 1 beautiful wife, and I am a podcaster. This is my podcast. Welcome to another episode of my podcast. If this is your first time, welcome for the first time. If you are a returning listener, thank you for all the support. I appreciate it so much. If this is your first time and you like what you hear today, please rate, review, subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Put a review in there. It helps the algorithm. Take a screenshot, put up on your social media, tag me at Cody Diener. Let the world know that you found this new podcast called Wrestling is Life is Wrestling and you are enjoying it. I need to shill a few things before I talk about today's wicked awesome guest, Jimmy Jacobs. Number one thing I got to tell you about is Rest When Dead clothing. Go to restwhendead.ca and get all your workout attire. They got tank tops, not just for men, but for women. They got leggings. They got new limited edition backpacks. They got shaker cups. They got everything over at restwhendead.ca. Or if you need some supplements to bring your workout to the next level, head on over to ceofit.ca. They have a bunch of different pre-workouts, different plant-based proteins. They've got nootropics for your brain, not just for your muscles. And there's free shipping to Canadians who make an order of over $120 or any other size order. If it's under that, it's only $7.50. If you're an American, it's only $6 shipping. So super cheap shipping or free shipping over at ceofit.ca, depending on what you order. You can support this project and me personally by going on over to patreon.com/Cody Diener. If you want to sign up for a free trial, go do it right now. And you can listen to not just part 1 with Jimmy Jacobs, but part 2. This entire conversation, early and ad-free with today's guest, has already been up for a couple of days over on patreon.com/Cody Diener, as well as all of my guests' early and ad-free conversations, plus bonus stories. Every single one of my guests, I do a bonus story that is not on the regular free podcast. It's only exclusive to my patrons over on patreon.com/Cody Diener. You can get yourself a cameo at cameo.com/Cody Diener. A lot of people have been doing that recently. I love doing it. Get yourself a cameo for yourself or your business, or get yourself a t-shirt, including the exclusive Wrestling is Life is Wrestling t-shirt that can be picked up at prowrestlingtees.com/Cody Diener. If you are a business and you want to advertise your business on my podcast, let's do business together. Hit me up at ads@codydiener.com. That's ads@codydiener.com. There's a reason that Rest When Dead Clothing, CEO Fit, and other companies advertise with me, because it works. Hit me up at ads@codydiener.com and we can talk about how I can advertise your business on my platforms. Whew, how was that for some shilling? I want to get that done and out of the way because I want to talk about today's guest and today's conversation with Jimmy Jacobs. Wrestling fans are familiar with Jimmy Jacobs. Maybe it was his time in Ring of Honor and the things that he did there. Or some of you, if you are someone that knows about the behind the scenes of professional wrestling and you read the dirt sheets, maybe you know that Jimmy Jacobs is a former WWE creative writer or a former Impact Wrestling /TNA wrestling creative writer. or you've been following it recently and you know that he has now landed in AEW as part of the creative team. Well, that's Jimmy Jacobs. He has so much wrestling experience, not just in the ring, but behind the scenes creatively. And you are going to learn right away from this conversation. I think you're going to learn why he's somebody on the creative team, because he is one creative dude and he thinks about the world and life on another plane. He's on another plane, guys. And I've had so many cool life conversations with my friend Jimmy Jacobs, and I decided this is a kind of conversation I want my listeners to hear. So today's conversation is so much different than our previous guests. It's just different. And that's because Jimmy Jacobs is different. He's unique, he is interesting, and he is awesome. And I think somebody out there is going to get something from this conversation. It's going to help you either think about your life or your world in a different way by listening to the way Jimmy Jacobs tackles not just wrestling, but life. Because what is this? Well, this is Wrestling is Life is Wrestling. So without further ado, let's listen to this very interesting, unique, and amazing conversation with the one and the only Jimmy Jacobs. Jimmy Jacobs, how you doing, man?
Yeah, that's what they call me for some reason.
Yeah,
I had to name myself that 25 years ago, and here I am. Yeah,
here you are, man. 25 years ago. So I just did some research on you before we hopped on here, just real quick, which was like Wikipedia reading for like 2 seconds. And I didn't need a lot of notes for you because I'll tell you in a minute why I have you on as a guest, because I'm pretty excited about it. But as I was reading her, we are like pretty close in our career spans. You debuted in 99, I debuted in 2000. You're from Grand Rapids, correct?
Yep.
So and I'm only a couple hours from there across the border in Ontario. So I don't know. I think maybe we'll find some similarities today in our life, Jimmy, that we didn't realize we even had before.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Honest conversation can bring out a lot of surprises. So.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's exactly why I wanted to have you on here. Honest conversation. I've had some really good conversations with you, Jimmy, both, work-related conversations as we've worked together in the past with TNA Impact Wrestling as well as on the indies. But more than work conversations that I've had with you, the ones that stick with me more so than anything that was related to work were life conversations. One of them being one that was on your podcast, which is one of the favorite podcasts I've ever been on. And I listened to all of your episodes. I loved it. And it was one of the inspirations from even starting one, because I hummed and hawed for years on whether or not I want to start one. And yours inspired me to really give it some more thought and take it seriously about doing it. So thank you for that. But anytime I've talked to you, Jimmy, you're like an open book. You're honest. You connect meaningful life lessons and things to other things happening in the world around you, including wrestling. And that's really what this podcast is all about. I've learned so many life lessons in my journey in this wacky, crazy world of fake fighting and spandex. And I've also made a second career speaking to young people about those lessons. And I decided I want to start talking to my friends and kind of get their insight and about their life and things that they've learned in their journey, and how wrestling has influenced how they view life and the world in general. And after talking to you, having conversations with you, I'm like, that's something right up Jimmy Jacobs' alley, I think. Is that a fair assessment, Jimmy?
Well, it's interesting. I'll tell you just some of the stuff that came up. First of all, thank you for having me on. And, it's interesting. I say interesting a lot because I think a lot of stuff is interesting.
Me too. I say that's one of my favorite words, actually.
Yeah, it's like, well, this is interesting. Yeah. That you and I aren't like particularly friends. We're not like particularly friends, but you are someone that I have a lot of respect for professionally and personally. Like we've always gotten along really great, and I think wrestling wise, you get it. Not everybody gets it. I didn't realize that until only a few years ago. I was like, why have I had any success in wrestling? Me, I should not have. why me? And it's like, oh, because there's something that I understand about what we do that's just not. It's not common sense. The stuff that is just clear to someone like you or me isn't clear to everybody. Everybody doesn't see the picture that we're attempting to paint in professional wrestling. And all I ever do as a producer is talk to talent, and I'm pointing at something. You go, hey, try this, but really it's like you're trying to get someone to see what it is we're talking about, like what it is that we do, what the art form is. And of course, I can go deep into a lot of this sort of stuff about, and that's a microcosm to reality itself, just to some degree, right? I say that a lot too, to some degree. Not like full on, but it's like to some degree. It is, because like we're pointing at something at all times, that the particulars in our life as we have this conversation, it has to be idiosyncratic insofar as there's you and me, two unique individuals in it. But if we're having a proper conversation of give and take, and we're talking about the correct thing, and we're and you're listening and I'm listening, and you're giving and I'm giving, and we're feeding off of each other, that's a symbol that points to something. You go, well, why would you have a conversation like you're having? There's such thing as a good conversation, a bad conversation. Why? Well, if I put the certain sounds together in the right order that make the certain words, and words are pointing at the correct things that create the correct paragraph, create the correct idea with the correct give and take, it's like, that's good. There's a way that it's good, and there's a way that it's bad. And it's the same thing with wrestling. It's the same thing with all things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And people don't see that speaks to an underlying metaphysical reality, like that you can have something that seems like, well, it's kind of arbitrary. What do you mean a conversation can be good? What do you mean a wrestling match? Like, what makes a wrestling match good? What makes a wrestling character good? It's good because it maps onto reality's patterns. That's what makes it good. That's what makes stories, and good stories, and really good stories, the stories that stick around for thousands of years, that like there's a reason for it. It's not for no reason.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a reason Harry Potter is going to stand the test of time forever, and the Twilight series probably isn't. There's a reason for that. So yeah, that's so I see you as someone that sees the picture that we're painting in pro wrestling, and I think from our other conversations, you see what it is to whatever degree any of us do. Like, what's going on here? Like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this? Like, this here-ness, we're experiencing here-ness and now-ness, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
What makes it worthwhile, and what drags you into the muck? And there are things that do that. It's not all just arbitrary and socially constructed like people like to think, although that does play some sort of role. But I'll go on forever about this stuff, but the things that are socially constructed that are beneficial because, again, they match up with the patterns of reality. They map to reality itself, and that's what makes it beneficial. Like, you can't have stuff that's outside of the realms of the patterns of reality and have it be good at the same time. That's like saying I can lie, and lying is better than telling the truth. It's like
There's like, Jimmy, there's at least 7 things you just said that I'm like, okay, I could take this conversation 7 different directions, because you just said at least 7 things of like, oh, that's interesting. I should have wrote it down, but I didn't, because I want this to flow naturally. But a couple things that stood out, I guess one in particular is the first thing you said was you were just recently thinking like, how did I become successful in wrestling? And that was going to be one of my questions for you was like, because I feel the same way about you as I see about myself, because I often reflect and go, I'm not supposed to be here in the typically written story for pro wrestlers in this, stereotypical world of giants, especially when you and I started, if you're not 6'4" and you're not over 220, get out of here. And for some reason, I've been able to stick around, and I don't even know what the answer is as to how. And then when I see someone like you, you've had to overcome those same stereotypes and those same obstacles, and you've done it in your own way and in your own journey, which fascinates me. It's interesting, like you say. It's just interesting that you've been able to do it. And it's like, I always want to figure out like why. And if I can ask somebody why and they have insight, awesome. Or we can even explore that question together. But you picked up on that with me and your interest of me as a wrestler and professionally. And that's exactly the same reason why I think I'm drawn to you, even though, like you said, we're not friends, but we're friendly. And we see this thing in each other that is like what you're saying, potentially like this universal idea of, yeah, there's a story there that I like and I'm drawn to. And I want to explore that. So I don't even have a question there other than maybe why, and you could take that however you want.
Well, it's interesting because you say, like these things I, let's say, had to overcome. It never felt that way. It never felt that way to me. I was always, so I started to put together the pieces of the puzzle of like, insofar as I've been successful, I don't want to go like, oh, I'm the most successful guy ever. Yeah. I'm not, but a handful of years ago, I was converting my VHS tapes to DVD or digital or something like that. And so I was watching this old stuff of me. I'm like 16 years old, 17 years old. And I was a lunatic, man. Like I went out there with so much energy as soon as I walked out the curtain at like 16, 17. And I had like all these different places I would work. I would have like these different gimmicks. I'm jumping Jimmy Jacobs on a pogo stick coming out, and I've got a top hat, and I'm like a maniac, and I'm running around, and like it's just like, holy cow, like who is like, good for this kid, good for this year-old kid. And then I'm over here in Illinois, and I'm the big bully Jimmy Jacobs. I've got like a powerhouse gym cutoff shirt, and I'm stepping over the top rope like I'm the giant, and I'm flexing like I'm Hulk Hogan, and just like this massive amount of energy. I'm in GLW in Michigan, and I'm like, I got this long fur coat and a little bow tie and no shirt. Like I'm like 16, 17, acting like I'm a stripper, and it's like, what is this guy doing? But wrestling was such a release for me. I'm naturally, I don't know, naturally, whatever these personalities that we think we have, that we think we are, that whether it's a coping mechanism or just sort of my innate disposition. I was a pretty shy kid, and to this day, I would say I'm fairly like introverted, and wrestling was just like the space for me to fully express myself. It was like, that was the safe space. I later in my life started to call it like intimacy at a distance. It's like you can have all of me as long as there's a barricade between us. Yeah. And then I will pour my soul out. You can see what's hiding under the surface that, my parents don't see, that my friends don't see, the people at school don't see. I will give you all of it. So there was that was a component of it. And some of it is just like putting one foot in front of the next too. Like people think things are like really complex, and kind of they're not. Like if you just keep putting one foot in front of the next in the direction you want to go, it might take you a long time, but like you have to get there. There's no other option. If you're going the right way, there's literally no other option. And wrestlers are so neurotic in this sometimes. Like, oh man, oh no, my career. It's like, just keep walking, dude. Like you'll be fine. So that was a component as well. And just there was something I innately understood about what wrestling was, that from when I was 15 years old, that no one had to teach me, that I was surprised, 20 years later, working with people in WWE, we go, how I knew this at 15, because this is what wrestling is. You don't understand that this is what wrestling is. So I was undersized, underage, undertrained, all those things, and it was just go out and do it. That's all. That's all life's about. Is just go and do it and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I feel like I want to ask you about something you said previously that's again related to what you're saying now, like about stories. I hear a lot recently I listen to a lot of motivational podcasts, and I'm a speaker, so a lot of my speaking friends talk about this, and they often use the phrase the story that we tell ourselves, right? And that's actually, to a lot of people, you can make an argument that that's reality in the sense that it's your reality because it's a story that you're telling yourself. So two things come to mind about that is, maybe one, has the story that you've told yourself in your career changed to create success for you? And then two, is that maybe why we're drawn to wrestling? Because it's actually a medium in which we get to create stories that we can tell not only ourselves but others. I know those are two very different questions, but maybe you can tackle either one that's of interest to you.
Yeah. So I don't know I wasn't self-aware of a lot of things, and some of my self-awareness might be to my detriment. I'm not sure. Of whatever stories I was telling myself when I was younger. I have so much admiration and love for that 15-year-old kid, that 16-year-old kid that just did it. Like it's so insane for me to look back at and go, there was no reason I should have done this. Like there was no, now if the same thing was put in front of me, I would go, well, no, look at this. Like there's just, no, I shouldn't do that. I know it's something I might want to do, but I shouldn't do it. So I have so much respect for that I wasn't sort of like in my head and wrapped up in whatever sort of stories I was telling myself. The stories we tell ourselves can be helpful, and they can be they can hinder us. That's for sure. And I found a handful of years ago that that one of my issues was that I was getting the stories I was telling myself confused with reality as such.
I want to take a pause from this conversation now to tell you about a very special and exclusive release happening over at restwhendead.ca. And that is the release of the Jesse Scott Rest When Dead Fighting Spirit t-shirt. Jesse Scott is not just a friend or a colleague of Rest When Dead, but he's truly a member of the Rest When Dead family. He's been a friend of the president of Rest When Dead, Aaron York, since high school. He was the very first person to support Rest When Dead with the very first online order. The first online customer for Rest When Dead was Jesse Scott. But his connection to Rest When Dead goes deeper than that. He is my friend and was there the very first day that I started wrestling school. I started wrestling school because Jesse Scott decided to start a wrestling school and start a wrestling promotion called Fighting Spirit Pro Wrestling. He created a platform for individuals like myself, Eric Young, Sean Spears, and fellow Rest When Dead athlete Crazy Steve. None of us would be where we are today in the wrestling industry if it wasn't for wrestling promoter and fellow wrestler and Rest When Dead family member Jesse Scott. But Jesse Scott has a very different, unique, and difficult challenge ahead of him right now. because Jesse Scott has recently been diagnosed with cancer. Jesse Scott has always been someone who displays a fighting spirit both in and out of the ring, and we know that he will display that same fighting spirit for the challenge that he has ahead of him. And he's going to need to show that fighting spirit because he is surrounded by a beautiful family. He has a wonderful wife, and he's also the father to 3 young boys. And in light of the challenges that are posed by Jesse's new circumstances and his wife's decision to prioritize time at home with Jesse and the kids, Rest When Dead is proud to introduce the Jesse Scott Fighting Spirit signature tee. Rest When Dead commits to donating 100% of the profits from this shirt to Jesse and his family to aid with their expenses with this challenge that is ahead of him. Furthermore, 50% of the profits from any additional Rest When Dead merchandise that's purchased in conjunction with the new Jesse Scott signature shirt will also be allocated to support Jesse and his family. So head on over to restwhendead.ca and consider supporting an amazing family man and a proud member of the Rest When Dead family, Jesse Scott.
So funny. I was talking to my friend right now, and I said something to her like, the story I have right now is, I'm an inconvenience on people's life. That's the story, and it feels true. The story I'm telling myself, the story I have right now is that I've made bad choices in my life, and I deserve to be alone, and that feels true, right? These stories that we have, it's like that's how it looks. That's how it looks to us, and obviously, some stories aren't helpful, and there are many, many, many stories we're telling ourselves that we're just unaware that we're telling ourselves. We think reality is happening in front of us in a certain way, but we're unaware that our perception has been skewing the entire thing. So yeah, there's a lot to that. As far as stories in wrestling and that being a medium trust, I mean, when you talk about stories as such, you're talking about something way, way deeper than pro wrestling. You're talking about like our entire framework for reality, how like we perceive our lives, we perceive every moment in our life as a story, as the story of I wake up, I have to pee, let me go solve this problem of going to pee. It's like Act 1, existence is. Act 2, here's this issue. Act 3, I take care of this issue. It's like you can't help, like you have no choice but to experience everything in your life. Story is like the intermediary between our perception and reality. It's like intermediary of our experience. It's such a deep topic to talk about. It's like, I mean, this is it. It's like what is the story? And there's a story, and there is.
Yeah.
People don't see that, like there is a story that, again, it speaks to the metaphysical underpinnings of reality. Joseph Campbell wrote about this, right? The Hero with 1,000 Faces, where he took different myths and stories from different cultures that had been around and tried to sort of draw this, make a model of the hero's journey of like this. Here's the commonality between all these stories. Here's how it fits together. And like I've read it, and I'm sure you could.
Is this the 7 basic plots? Is that Joseph Campbell, or is that someone else?
I don't know.
Okay, but the hero's journey, I'm right with you. I understand. Yes, for sure.
Right. Hero's journey is Joseph Campbell. And look, I'm sure you could levy criticism at it, at being a little too broad with certain things. And so he comes up with the hero's journey and goes, this is the story, and to some degree it's right, but it's still idiosyncratic in some ways. Really, the story that's going on is the story of up and down. That's all. It's the story of the expansion of consciousness and the contraction, and how in every moment we have the choice or the perception of a choice. If you believe in free will or the illusion of free will, take your pick. We have the choice of choosing heaven or choosing hell. That's all that's going on in all moments. You have the opportunity to do the next right thing that leads you towards expansion of who you are and who you can be in your consciousness, or you have the choice to sort of to serve the ego, and the ego has its place. Don't get me wrong, it's not wrong inherently to choose what the ego wants, but the ego really wants sameness. It wants comfort. It wants to keep you in the sort of circle, and and that will eventually turn into a circle of hell if you continue doing it. So that's the story. The story is just like, it's the relationship between expansion of consciousness and contraction. It's a story. I mean, there's so many ways to conceptualize this as the relationship between the spirit and the ego. Again, most fundamentally, it's up and down. That's it. That's all that's going on, up and down. And there are various ways to talk about that, but that is story.
Is that how you tackle writing creatively for wrestling? Are those things that you're talking about now, is that a springboard towards writing something for wrestling, or how do you even begin that process?
That's an underlying understanding of what's going on, but you like, so all this stuff, man. I'm sorry. This is what I spend my time on. This is what interests me. So here
I know it does, and this interests me too, and that's exactly why I want to talk to you. This is exactly why.
So there are two things going on at once at all times. So so reality is just patterned, right? That's all that's all that's going on. It's just patterns. My life changed when I realized just everything is patterns, and the patterns are self-similar across levels and between levels, and that's all. It's just patterns everywhere. That's all. That's what consciousness is. Consciousness is the recognition of patterns. It's awesome. So one of the patterns that goes on, like in a very, very fundamental sense with everything, is like the relationship between the particular and the universal, right? And so so I can say universally up and down is the story, but for the universal to manifest, I hope I don't like get over people's heads on this, but for the universal to manifest, it needs a particular, right? It can't manifest itself as just the universe. So I'm sitting in this chair. This chair is a chair because it's the universal pattern of chair, but it needs a particular. It needs this sort of idiosyncratic chair, I guess. This just like this unique chair in order to manifest as chair. Otherwise, there is no chair. There's only the idea of chair, and chair can't even be an idea without the manifestation of it, right? To some degree. So that's what I see, and I've seen this for a long time before I even understood a lot of this stuff. I saw it in wrestling characters. Long before I understood the depths of what I was of this, really saw the depths of it. I used to say to guys with their characters, it's like, you need both. I would call it like the relatable and the unique at the same time. Like, you need like this package that sets you aside from everybody, that goes, oh, look at him, he's unique. But if it's too idiosyncratic, then there's nothing there. There's nothing relatable behind it. So inside this package that you've put your character in, the character, the relatableness, this whatever that quality is that you're attempting to to get across to the audience, I'm a guy who's cocky. It's like, well, cockiness again must need a particular in order to manifest. So you can put a Burberry scarf around you and say that I'm better than you, and you know it, and you go, oh, that's how the universal manifests itself. So that's how this again, part of being cocky or arrogant is part of this. That's a concept that's way back here in the universal, in the sort of down. You can put that in the down area, right? It's like, oh, he's cocky, he's arrogant, he thinks he's better than people. This is a quality of hell, so to speak. Whereas someone here is valiant and courageous, and that's a quality of the up. Of heaven, you could say. And how do I put a cloak on that to give that form in front of people? Yeah.
I recently heard, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. It's reminding me of something. I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins. People might have their views of that guy and think he's just that guy in Shallow Hal, but he's got some really good stuff that he puts out there. And I did a seminar of his recently, and one thing that just blew into my mind and manifested there and rolled around, and I feel is so useful. He talked about patterns, and he goes, the key. One of his keys, I don't remember, I'm going to paraphrase here, but like a key to kind of, I don't want to say success, but like maybe getting control of either your life or success or your own story is all related to patterns. Step one, recognize that they exist. Like, just recognize that there's patterns. Okay. Number two, learn how those patterns work, so that you can kind of develop them on your own. And then three, the mastery of it is when you can then create a pattern. So a good example for this is music. So my daughter, she's learning to play piano. She's amazing at it. She was a natural at it right away because she could recognize patterns. I look at a piano and go, I don't understand how you move the fingers on the keys, but she could do it. She can literally listen to a song and then start playing it. It's amazing. But she recognizes patterns. Her second mastery was, oh, I recognize the pattern. I hear that pattern. I can play it. You can teach me a song very easily. Boom. I can recreate those patterns very easily. But then now she's getting to the point, this next step of mastery, where she now knows the patterns. She's heard other people's patterns. She goes, now I'm going to create my own pattern. And she's writing her own music. And it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's all patterns.
Dude, yeah, man. Dude, that's all. Like I said, dude, when I finally realized this 3 or 4 years ago, it was like, oh, that's all everything is. And it's so cool because, again, the conclusion I've come to is this is a fractal reality. So if you see a pattern over here, you can make a deduction of how this over here works, or the pattern, the law of correspondence, the as above, so below. It's like, if you understand how the microcosm works, you understand you can point to the macrocosm and vice versa, and it's so cool. It's really just like a weight off me epistemologically, just knowing how you can know truth. It's like, oh, because truth presents itself in certain ways, and I can observe it. I don't need to believe what a bunch of people say about things. I can observe patterns, and I can recognize patterns. Yeah, man, that's. The first time I this is maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when I first saw, oh, something is pattern. The first time it came into my awareness was something with relationships. And it's like, man, this is how I used to be. I used to fight with my partners about this thing that's going on. And I would go, oh, she did, you're doing this, and I'm doing this. And it's as if this moment, this argument is the argument. And it's like realizing like, no, that's a symptom. That's a symptom. That's like one data point of a bunch of data points that makes up a pattern. And there's an underlying reason that this pattern is being created. Right.
Yep.
And again, it's like this in all things. And again, now you have to start to talk about, we don't have to talk about anything, but we're talking about, okay, now what creates patterns? Because we have so many unconscious patterns in our lives. If you pay attention to your thoughts, you'll notice patterns, and these patterns of thought that seem to be just like happening to you, and things in your life that seem to be happening to you. I used to have things that like just happen to me all the time, right? It was like, oh, why is this same thing happening to me all the time? It's like, what's the common fact? It's like, well, it's me, right? And so you go, well, what creates? Yeah, so it's like what's creating the patterns in my life and in all of this, and then it's like, what creates reality? That then gets down to it. It's like, what does create reality? And then the conclusion that I've come to, that other people have come to well before me, because it's like not like any of this is new. There's a saying, there's nothing new under the sun, and you realize that once you start to see more of what's going on, it's like there's nothing new here. There's my unique snowflake interpretation of it, my unique snowflake relationship with it, but there's nothing new under the sun. That ultimately, at the bottom of all of this all sort of stems from, obviously the laws of reality itself and the mind. It's like all of our actions first start from this inner point, and then so it's our like our beliefs, basically. It's the stories we tell ourselves, and creating the experience we have. So if you don't have an awareness on the stories you're telling yourself, you will think that what reality is a place where I'm not lovable, even though that all stems from a belief first and foremost that says I'm not lovable, which then informs my actions, and then my actions put into the algorithm of reality, put into this feedback system that is reality. It's a seed that's being planted and then comes back at us. So if I have a belief that I'm not lovable, and that is a belief that one might have, and I continue to act with that belief, it's like, how can I plant that seed and expect the fruits to be anything other than fruits of the tree of I'm not lovable? It's impossible. It's impossible. And so that's why it's so important to understand yourself, to know thyself, because otherwise this experience in this place we're in feels like a thing that is just being thrown at you and bombarded at you, when the truth is that you are a co-creator of the experience. And there's a lot of, that's a daunting idea that people don't like to really take ownership of, because it's daunting. Yeah. It really means that you're responsible for your life.
Yeah. I'd like to, as you're talking, I want to ask you a personal question, and you don't have to answer it, and we can even move on. But you have talked about it publicly in the past. Like, are these types of things that you're saying in terms of how it can get daunting, or you're kind of scared, so people can maybe get scared to even recognize or explore these things? Is that something that either led to or was the cause of drug addiction for you?
The drug addiction is an interesting thing. It's interesting.
That's going to do it for another episode of Wrestling is Life is Wrestling with Cody Diener, and part 1 with Jimmy Jacobs. What did I tell you guys? I told you, Jimmy Jacobs, he's not just interesting. There's that word again, interesting, but he is unique. He's different. He's on another plane. He thinks about life in such a unique way. I learn something different, or I think about the world in a different way every single time I talk to Jimmy. And that's what happened today in part 1. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know it's a lot different than some of the other conversations that I've had, but that's because every conversation that I have is different. That's why I'm bringing on these interesting, unique guests onto the show to talk about not just wrestling, because we're talking about more than wrestling, guys. What we are talking about is life. We're talking about the good stuff, the things that I think are going to help my listeners grow and expand their horizons and help you in some way. If you were helped in some way from today's conversation, please let me know. Tag at Cody Diener on social media. I've got Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Let me know that you listened to today's episode. I'll put it out to the world, and the world will know that you enjoyed Wrestling is Life is Wrestling in part 1 with Jimmy Jacobs. If you liked it so much that you're like, man, I don't want to wait till next week to listen to part 2, then hey, why don't you go sign up for a free trial right now over at patreon.com/Cody Diener, and you can listen to the entire conversation, part 1 and 2, with Jimmy Jacobs right now, including a bonus story with Jimmy. That is over right now at patreon.com/Cody Diener. There is a free trial, so you can test it out, try it out, look at the content, see if you like it. Then you can decide whether or not you want to be a full-time supporter. That's patreon.com/Cody Diener. If you are an indie wrestling promoter and you want to have me on your wrestling show, I would love to share my love of professional wrestling with you and your fans. I'm accepting independent bookings right now on my very public email, bookcody@codydiener.com. That's bookcody@codydiener.com. I've got some availability. I'm super busy actually, but I do have some availability here and there. Man, I got indies booking me all the way into December right now. So please hit me up. And if I have room in my calendar for you and your indie show, I would love to do it. If you listen to today's episode and you're like, man, this has been inspiring, and you learn that, hey, this guy isn't just a wrestler having interesting conversations with fascinating people like Jimmy Jacobs. He's also a professional speaker, going into schools and youth groups and businesses, sharing his story about life and life lessons he's learned along the way, and you want to book me at your event, hey, hit me up. That email is chrisgrayspeaks@gmail.com. That's Gray with an A, chrisgrayspeaks@gmail.com. Or you can just go to chrisgrayspeaks.com. You can learn more about my other life that I have as a professional speaker, and you can send me an email and inquire about me coming to your event. What does that mean? What kind of topics do I speak about? What have my satisfied clients had to say about the service that I give them? You can find all of that over at chrisgrayspeaks.com right now. If you're listening to this episode right when it drops, hey, this weekend in Windsor, Ontario, it's TNA Sacrifice. We've got Moose against Eric Young for the TNA Heavyweight Championship, as well as tapings the following day. So, hey, get yourself the TNA Plus app. It is wicked awesome. You not only get every single episode of TNA Wrestling, Impact Wrestling live each and every week when it airs, but you also get the premium experience of the pay-per-views. They are all on TNA Plus. So go check that out right now. Get on your Google machine, type in TNA Plus app, and consider joining that. Whew. All right. I think that's enough for me today, guys. I'm tired. I am excited that I have some things I'm going to be doing with my kids, because I said at the top of the show, I'm a dad. My favorite thing to do is spend some time with my kids. I got to go do that. I got to go spend time with some of my children right now. We got some wicked awesome things planned for tonight. Maybe I'll tell you about that in a future episode. But until then, I'm going to go enjoy my life while you guys go and do the same. And in the meantime and in between time, I want you guys to enjoy your life, and I want you to come back next week for part 2 with Jimmy Jacobs, because when you do, you're going to learn all over again that wrestling is life, is wrestling. We'll see you next week, guys.
Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life. Wrestling is life, is wrestling.